Victoria Park, what a beautiful semi-hidden, semi-gated area development of Los Angeles. It's gated on one side, the side that runs along Venice Boulevard. Venice, one of the major thoroughfares of LA, that goes all the way down to the community of Venice, created by an interesting fellow named Abbott Kinney. That's a story for another time or another book. So it's gated on one end. The only people who've got keys are, I suppose, the residents and emergency services. So they could come in case of something that needs to get done. And then there's a small little opening on another major street. And this is a case, again, if you don't know about this area, if you don't know it's there, you're going to miss it. Because it's just a small little, almost like an alleyway, bam, small little street to get to this beautiful area. So I want to talk about some of the homes there. I want to talk about some of the preserved homes of Victoria Park. And, I always try to include some photos in this volume, at least one per chapter, of the activities of the area. And so I want to talk about Ciclovia. And finally, a little bit more about these gates, or about what I'm trying to do and my concerns about this project as it relates to mystery. So let's talk about the preserved homes. I thought Victoria Park, or some people call it Victoria Circle, so many homes are preserved inside. I thought, well, this would be a great time in this chapter to look at a couple of them. So we look at two. We look at the Holmes Shannon house and the Hurd residence. If you look at something like the Hurd, you play that animated panorama, and you look at the photos of it back in the day, around 1912, somewhere along there, you can see there's been almost no change. So we have examples in Victoria Park of homes that are basically unchanged, and I believe the Hurd residents may have stayed in the same family, and also maybe the Home Shannon stayed in the same family for decades and decades. Some of these homes have only had one or two owners. The Colonel Stearns Mansion, for instance, which you'll see in North University Park, I believe the current owners are only the second, so it's stayed in the family for decades or 100 years. So we've got these beautiful preserved homes. And you look at these homes and you think, boy, if they were any other place in LA, they'd be selling for millions and millions. But of course, here in the semi-forgotten West Adams district, they're sold for nowhere near as much. And in the case of, I won't say which owner, but in the case of one of the homes in Victoria Park, you had some, younger owners buying into the area. And they got the sticker shock after they purchased it for a relatively low price for this incredible place, when they got the property tax bill. Like, oh my God, how are we going to afford this? Well, there's something called the Mills Act, which allows for property tax relief for an historic home, right? And so some of that money can actually be put towards restoration. So they're able to greatly reduce their property tax and make it a place they could actually live in. And that's one of the benefits of owning an historic home in here, is that you can qualify, if your home is historic, it's been recognized for property tax relief. That, and of course, the other thing that's a great benefit is if you own one of these homes, is that you can rent it out for location shoots for TV and movies. You'll see the great example of that craftsman in the film Insidious, which is used in all the promotional materials for the poster and advertisements, what have you. And so time and time again in West Adams, when I shot ththese beautiful homes, I would find that they're quite often the setting for many movies and TV. And as I've mentioned before, and if the owners really luck out, it becomes like the home for the villain for a whole season, like of Bones, for instance, right? So they can just keep cashing in, and people can pay for their new kitchen, which is great. So that's kind of a benefit of living here, the Mills Act and film and TV. Let's talk a little bit about the Ciclovia. I wanted to include some example of neighborhood activities, and Ciclovia happened to be going by while I was shooting one day. Now, I shot over a year and a half in this project, and that's why you'll see photographs in Victoria Park, for instance, that are shot in springtime, and then you'll notice two pumpkins in one house outside of, I won't say who lives in there, we got to protect privacy. She's an actress, you would recognize her. You'll see two pumpkins. That's because that was obviously shot around Halloween time. So again, with all the homes and neighborhoods in this volume, I shot many, many, many times. I would go back to the same areas in the same house and keep shooting week after week, month after month, year after year until I got what I wanted. So we're seeing all the different seasons represented. But one of the days that I was shooting, there was Ciclavia. And Ciclavia is an event that we have here in LA. It happens several times a year. I think it's 3 times in 2014. I think this year we're having it in April, October, and December. And that's where a major thoroughfare, like Venice Boulevard, as you see in these pages, or Wilshire coming up, for miles and miles is shut off to cars, to traffic, and people can walk and bike. And so it opens up whole stretches of Los Angeles. This was an idea that came from Bogota in Colombia. I think they do it every week. Maybe they do it every Friday, something like that. And here we're doing it several times a year. And this is a really nifty example of the bicycle culture and the walking culture in LA. And of course, the cliche is that nobody walks in LA, right? Like the song goes. But that's not the case at all. In fact, the first place that I lived here in LA, in Harvard Heights, in a communal house, and you'll see some examples of communal house living in the Harvard Heights chapter, was a bunch of younger folks, almost all 20-somethings. Nobody had a car. Nobody had a car. They don't do that anymore. It's so expensive. The insurance, the gas. Why would you do that? LA is relatively level, unlike, say, biking in San Francisco, my hometown. And so everybody had a bike, and that was the bike culture was what was happening. And for me, being new to LA, of course, I'm going to see the differences between my accepted notion of what Los Angeles is, what the media shows us, and reality is going to appear in greater relief because I'm, brand new to the city, never lived here and barely ever visited here before. So that's why I wanted to include Ciclavia and say, hey, look, you see what we've got here in Los Angeles. Because even today, even the media, so oddly, that's made in LA, just perpetrates the stereotype. I mean, I watched something the other day. It was a big TV show, big new weekly show on a major network. I guess we still have networks, right? Millions of dollars spent every episode, and it opened up, and it said the strap line on the title, on the lower third of the screen said East LA. I thought, oh, East LA, okay. So and there's our protagonist, and it was obviously shot on the back lot, like in Burbank or Culver City, like the New York set. Right? It's just a New York set, and maybe they put an LA bus sign in the background. Fun little tip, by the way. If you're ever in LA, try to get a chance. I think Warner's does a tour of the back lot. That's always fun. One of the things about like their New York sets, a fun little fact is that how they show different time periods. If you look at the sets, they don't actually have any lighting fixtures. That's what they change. So they'll put in 70s lighting fixtures or 1800s, whatever, but everything else stays the same. Anyway, this is supposed to be East Los Angeles, but it was the same New York set. And our protagonist, first thing he says, we see him, he goes to a hot dog stand, hot dog vendor, buys a hot dog and says, thanks, Bernie. And I'm like, this is in New York in the 40s. What's going on here? We have such incredible wealth and diversity of food. We think of all the food trucks, the Korean barbecue and all the mashup of different kinds of foods. But here we are saying LA, East LA looks just like New York, and you got a hot dog stand from a guy named Bernie. I mean, it's nonsensical, and it's just an example of how the stereotype is perpetrated that LA is either just generic anywhere city, or it's a traffic-laden hellhole full of shallow folks. And the reality, and of course it's different, but there's such a multiplicity of ethnicities and cultures here that are not being shown in the media, that it certainly stood out, to me as I've been here. But if you ever are in LA, you might want to, you're into bikes, you might want to schedule your trip around something like Ciclavia. I want to talk a little bit, finally, here on this chapter in Victoria Park about this gated idea, because when we look at Van Buren Place, the first chapter in this book, and there's a gate at the end. And that gate was put up. You heard what Bob and Irene Grant had to say about that. They worked with the local politicians because there was trouble with the club and things like that. And there's gates the residents have put up at one end of Victoria Park. But it's not, the environment is not that of a gated community. Quite the opposite. It feels welcoming. Once you can get in there, it feels welcoming. Unlike gated communities I've been to, which have always creeped me out. I had a job once delivering. I was a delivery driver, and had to deliver packages off into gated communities. And I will stop myself here and say, I know I appreciate that I keep mentioning different jobs that I have here. For some reason, that keeps coming up in this and these sort of director's commentaries. So I can imagine the next project I'll mention a job I had doing Untold LA, and it just keeps going around in circles. It's turtles all the way down. But anyway, I had a job delivering for a while, and I was terrible at the forklift, by the way. Luckily, there were no accidents. But anyway, in terms of actually delivering, I would often go into gated communities, and they always creeped me out. And this was in the United States. There was this sense of blandness and control, where you had life outside the gated community, and then you had these layers, sometimes two, different security posts to get in there. And there's a feeling of fear. What are people so scared of that they have to remove themselves? People who have wealth or power, you want to remove yourself from the riffraff or the hoi polloi. What's going on here? And I always found them very disturbing. But I did not get that in any way from any of the parts of West Adams that happen to have gates on them. Victoria Park is one. Lafayette Square is another. And Lafayette Square is a fascinating area. You'll see a photograph of it across Venice. You'll see the gates of it in one of the photographs in this chapter. I haven't devoted a chapter to Lafayette Square. If I ever do like Untold LA 2 or Untold LA 1.5, do another chapter, I will do a whole chapter on Lafayette Square because it's got its own thing going on, which is fascinating. But the areas in West Adams that I've been to and traveled through this last year and a half, I've always been very welcoming. But it's just a case where people don't know about it, again, because it's gated on one end, and then on the other side, the entrance is nondescript. But I have to bring this up at this point. But here I am talking about it. So what am I doing? Am I revealing something? Am I helping to eliminate the mystery of something because I'm going into detail about these areas that people don't know about? And I'm mentioning this to you because this is sort of a director's commentary behind the scenes of the process of making this, of photographing these homes. It's something that has weighed on me. I'm worried about the absence of mystery. We think about all the technology that we have now. We've got, these phones or cameras that can Wi-Fi your Instagram or your Snapchats or what have you. And everything seems to be available. Of course, it's not, but everything we have certainly the feeling that everything is available. When I moved to London when I was 21, I didn't know anybody or anything, and I had to live by my wits. And I think if I moved there now, I would have just a huge amount of information available in order to navigate and do anything. And I appreciate I'm sounding like some old man kids, get off my lawn. But I wonder, and even am slightly concerned about that, removal of mystery. And, this is a common thing we're finding where I saw an interview the other day with Andrew Stanton, the director of, he did Finding Nemo? He did Wall-E. Maybe he did Finding Nemo as well. I'm not sure, but he did Wall-E. And he made a film called John Carter, which did terrible business relative to how much money it costs. This is this guy who visits Mars and battles and whatever. And many people wondered why the marketing was so bad. Why didn't it show he was on Mars? Why didn't it show the science fiction element? And it's because, he revealed in his interview, he wanted to be surprised. And it was clear that he harkened back to the time when he was a kid watching movies. And the same for me, when you would go into a film and not know everything about it. Right? So when I was a kid and I snuck in, I was underage, way too young to see the Terminator with Arnold Schwarzenegger, you didn't know what was going to happen because you were not bombarded with trailers and sneak previews and fake leaks that tell you everything that's going to happen. And so with Andrew Stanton and John Carter, he wanted to have that sense of surprise when people actually watch the film, and the marketing didn't help, and it didn't do that well. But this is something that's a concern to me, that we're losing mystery at some level. And that's why in these photographs, I think consciously or not, or more consciously as the project went on, shooting for a year and a half, I wanted to retain some mystery so that all is not revealed. So you may look at some of these photographs and go, how come we're not seeing every room in the house? Or why aren't we seeing the bedroom? Or why aren't we seeing this angle? I wanted to have, at some level, some basic level, a sense of mystery inherent in these photos and in this project. So though some of it is revealed, right? That which is untold is now told, or that which is unseen is now seen. I wanted to retain mystery. It's something I think is vitally important in our lives.